Hello, how's it going? In today's video, I'm covering the Banshee Queen and the Fracturing of the Light from Chronicle Volume 3. So let's go! Arthur's leaving Lordaeron didn't exactly make everything dandy in the region. There were still some undead that were loyal to the Lich King wandering about. Othmar Garithos and his alliance forces were to the southwest, preparing to launch an offensive into the Fallen Kingdom. And trapped between these two sides were two rebel undead factions, one led by Sylvanas Windrunner, the other by the Dreadlords, Balnazar, Deathrok, and Varamathras. The Dreadlords sensed the rage burning within Sylvanas, and they actually kinda liked it, so they offered her a place in their army. And Sylvanas was like, sod off. She gave them war instead. She'd only just regained her free will from the Lich King. She wasn't about to sign up to a new master, plus the Dreadlords had helped bring the plague to Azeroth in the first place. They'd helped create Arthas, so she didn't exactly view them as potential buddies. Varamathras was the first to succumb to Sylvanas. To avoid defeat, he knelt down before her and was like, I'll do whatever you want, man, just don't kill me. Sylvanas knew full well that the Nathrezim were masters of manipulation, but he was still a potential weapon. He'd know the tactics the other Dreadlords would use against her. Whilst Varamathras remained useful, she'd allow him to draw breath. She gave no quarter to the other Dreadlords though. Her forces were few, but she gained super formidable new powers in Undeath. Plus her years as Ranger General made her pretty damn good at tactics and stuff. Deathrok was the next Dreadlord to fall. He'd managed to ensorcel Othmar Garithos and many other aligned soldiers at some point, but when Deathrok fell, the human commander and his forces were like, how the bloody hell did I get here? Garithos didn't trust Sylvanas or her undead, but the Dreadlords were an even greater threat, so he reluctantly agreed to help. Sylvanas even promised him control of the city for his assistance. Side note, Garithos is a bloody hypocrite, isn't he? Gelthas sides with the Naga, and that's bloody treason, but fighting alongside the undead is perfectly fine apparently. Jerk. Balnazar had barricaded himself behind the walls of Capital City, kinda crapping his pants about the inevitable upcoming siege. It wasn't long before Sylvanas and her forces breached the walls and defeated the Dreadlord. But, at this point, Garithos found out what Sylvanas' promise had actually meant, because she killed him. Her ghouls feasted on his remains until all that was left were bones. Lovely, but also good. Sylvanas now had a refuge she could use to protect herself and her followers. She dubbed herself the Banshee Queen and named her Peeps the Forsaken. She ordered her Forsaken to establish a new kingdom in the city's subterranean crypts, dungeons and sewers. This place became known as the Undercity. For now, the Banshee Queen and her followers are going to spend some time plotting to get their revenge against that twat, the Lich King. Meanwhile, Arthas, now merged with the Lich King, decided to remain in Northrend. Therefore, the task of commanding the Scourge in Lordaeron had fallen to Kel'Thuzad. Although that bitch Sylvanas and her forces were now entrenched in the Undercity, the Lich's undead still dominated much of the Plaguelands. There was another enemy that was really starting to piss him off though, the Order of the Silver Hand. Although they'd been devastated by the war with the Scourge, the remaining Paladins had been rather persistent, and were still bloody fighting to drive the undead from the land. Among these stubborn Paladins was Alexandros Mograine, wielder of the Ashbringer. This particular weapon had been crafted in Ironforge and infused with holy light. Any undead it touched just bloody exploded, leaving behind a pile of ash, hence the name, Ashbringer. It brings ash. Also, Alexandros' heroic deeds spread as the Paladins waged their war against the Scourge. Eventually, people started calling him the Ashbringer as well. The Paladins were resourceful and were doing pretty well against the Scourge, but whilst their focus had been solely on the undead, their ranks had been infiltrated by yet another bloody enemy, Balnazar. These buggers just keep coming back, don't they? Although he'd succumbed to Sylvanas, he hadn't been destroyed. He'd used the last of his power to flee to the Plaguelands, but without the help of his Dreadlord mates, his command over the undead was limited. As he hid in the shadows, he'd discovered the Paladins, and in them, he saw a means to create a new army. So he murdered a respected Paladin called Seydan Dathrahan, his name rhymes, and then he assumed his form. Disguised as such a respected holy warrior, he felt confident he could convince others to join him, except for that knob Alexandros Mograine. That guy's such a boy scout, he'd need to be taken care of first. So the Dreadlord gradually manipulated Alexandros' eldest son, Renault Mograine. Or is it Renault, like the car? Who cares? The young human fell to darkness and committed one of the gravest of acts. He murdered his father with the Ashbringer, his own bloody sword. That's double dickish. Side note again, both Alexandros' corpse and the Ashbringer would eventually be recovered by the Scourge somehow. Kel'Thuzad raised the legendary Paladin into undeath and transformed him into an obedient servant, and the sword, having been used for such an atrocious purpose, was distorted into an unholy shadow of the weapon it had once been. But enough about that. Alexandros' death had really startled the Paladins. Some of them were a little bit suspicious that a dark force had taken hold of Seydan Dathrahan and his followers, but they couldn't prove it. This created a division between the Paladins, and eventually they splintered into two separate factions, the Argent Dawn and the Scarlet Crusade. The Argent Dawn were the ones that held true to the tenets of the light, The Scarlet Crusade did not. Balnazar had control of them, and as his army, they became synonymous with extremism and corruption. And we're leaving it there! In the next Volume 3 video, there's a whole bunch of folks fighting over the remnants of the Sunwell's power, and then we're going to catch up with Cho'Gall and Garona, and that'll be the end of Chapter 3. As always, thanks very much to those of you who support the channel as patrons. If anyone would like to support the channel in that way, links in the description. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, all of that bollocks. And all there's left to say is, thanks for watching, and see ya!